Hello and welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, hi, you're very welcome. This is Reading the Past and I'm Dr. Cat. Every now and then there'll be an image that will catch your eye, make you do a double take and that will then stick in your mind and memory. Today, I want to talk about a painting that did just that for me. Now, I first saw the painting that we're going to be taking a look at today long before I ever knew that I was going to spend my life and career exploring early modern history, literature and culture. But nevertheless, it captivated me utterly. From the very moment I saw it, I wanted to know as much as I possibly could about it. And I hope, when I show it to you and we start talking about it, that you're going to feel the same too. But before we take a look at today's topic, I want to say an absolutely massive thank you to History Hit for sponsoring another video on this channel. A few weeks ago, I had the incredible privilege of visiting Hever Castle's new exhibition, which explores the intertwined lives of Catherine of Aragon and Anne Boleyn. But as you're about to see, I certainly wasn't the only one.
But I want to explore what Catherine and Anne were really like. Their personalities and actions were at the heart of the central upheaval of Henry VIII's reign. They shaped this story and played as important a role as any of the men.
I'm going to look at the events that unfolded as Anne moved from being Catherine's lady-in-waiting to become the lady waiting to marry the king.
And although Catherine and Anne's rivalry changed history, I want to ask a surprising question. Did these women have more in common than separated them?
I absolutely love this documentary and I just know that you will too. History Hit brings you the stories that shape the world through their award-winning online history channel and podcast network. It's like Netflix, but it's all history. Watch hundreds of hours of original history documentaries anywhere, anytime, on any device. Brought to you by expert historians such as Dan Snow, Professor Susanna Lipscomb, Dan Jones, and more. And as well as already having hundreds of expert-led programmes, they add 2 more every week. Click the link in my description box to find out more and to subscribe to History Hit. As an added bonus, History Hit are offering my viewers a very special discount. If you use the code READINGTHEPAST30, you will get 30% off of an annual subscription. Thanks again to History Hit for sponsoring this video. But now it's time for us to explore this wonderful work by Quentin Massys. For 3 generations, the Massys family contributed their skills and efforts to the flourishing field of Northern European art. We have, in fact, already featured one of their portraits on this channel. We looked at this one, the Sieve portrait by Quentin Massys the Younger that dates to around 1583. We looked at this portrait in a video that I made last year, titled Shaping Elizabeth I, Virgin and Goddess, and I will leave that video linked. Today, though, we're hopping back to near the start of the 16th century to look at a piece by the grandfather of this Quentin Massys, who was also called Quentin Massys. So, here it is. The painting that I first saw in person many years ago, in the National Gallery in London. It was painted, as I said, by Quentin Massys in around 1513. And today it carries the title, An Old Woman or the Ugly or Grotesque Duchess. Now, I think in the second title, the more unflattering one, we are certainly being told what the individual, or indeed individuals, who named this piece thought of its subject, and thus potentially what they intended those who looked upon it to understand as well. My question was, and is, what did the artist intend to convey? Or, if Massys was simply responding to a commission, what did his employer want and expect to see? Are we being shown a real person here? Someone who would have hoped to be represented in such a way they were being shown off to their best? Or is this, as some others have suggested, intended to be allegorical, even satirical? Well, let's work from the top down. Our subject is wearing a headdress with a beautiful embroidered floral pattern. This horned headdress, which was known as an escoffion, looks to me to be new or nearly new. There is no fraying or staining. The colours appear to be bright and unfaded. The white veil, with its frilled edge, also looks to be pristine. And that has been secured with a glittering gold, diamond and pearl brooch. The apparent newness of this headwear is, for me, a little strange, as by the start of the 16th century this type of headwear, which was once the preserve of very stylish royal and noble ladies, had frankly become unpardonably old-fashioned. Indeed, some satirists and moralisers had drawn parallels between the two peaks of headdresses like this and the horns of a devil or demon, and they had been doing so for quite some years, even for decades. And so, by 1513, when it is thought that this piece was in fact painted, escoffions and their cousin the hennin had been firmly set aside in favour of far less elaborate constructions, such as the gable hood. The lady in this painting is therefore likely wearing the elite fashions from her own girlhood, which in turn arguably renders her out of date. Is this, as has been suggested, this artist's mocking presentation of women who cling fervently to the fashions of their youth as if that was some way to actually remain or simply appear youthful themselves? Are we being invited to laugh at the foolishness of old people who behave as if they are still young? Her gown and shift are low-cut. Her bodice appears to have been laced up in such a way that her bust is pushed up, causing her skin to wrinkle under the pressure. Her appearance has been much discussed, and perhaps in some ways that's understandable. The description of her, of this painting, on the National Gallery's website reads as follows, quote, "An elderly woman with lively eyes deep set in their sockets, a snub nose, wide nostrils, pimply skin, a hairy mole, bulging forehead and prominent square chin, and rests one hand on a marble parapet. Her neck is rumpled by age, and she seems to have lost all her teeth. She challenges every traditional canon of beauty." While, as this description mentions, one of her beringed hands does rest upon what they're calling a parapet, which looks to me to be some form of marble ledge or shelf, in her other hand she holds a closed red rosebud. Christopher P. Jones explains that, quote, "The woman offers a rosebud, connoting passionate love and also a symbol of engagement. In other words, she is looking for a lover. Yet the rosebud is tightly closed in on itself, indicating that her attempts to attract a suitor will sadly come to nothing. Are we being asked to read her as an individual who has perhaps waited too long to marry, perhaps even to marry for the first time? Is then this closed red rosebud a claim to, or perhaps an announcement of, a perpetually virgin state? This portrait has a companion piece. It was intended to be paired with another piece by Massis, an image that has come to be known as an old man. Here we see him presented in profile. His face is also lined. His nose, we can see, is misshapen. His lower lip protrudes as if to indicate an underbite, and his jowls are also made prominent. He is also resting one hand on this marble parapet, the ledge or shelf, but we see that his other hand is being held up. Is he about to reach out of his frame and into hers, to accept that rosebud that she offers? Or is he instead showing his refusal of her advances? When these paintings are placed side by side, interestingly, the woman would sit on the right-hand side of her male companion, at least from their perspective. And this fact represents an inversion of the traditional expected order, because the right-hand side is the place of prominence, and therefore it was expected to be the side that was reserved for the man to stand on. This inversion is similar to things that early modern people would have recognised and enjoyed as being tied to the misrule that could be expected on high days and holidays. On occasions like this, frequently the social order would be turned upside down. Lords or ladies of misrule would be selected. These were usually servants, and for the span of perhaps a day, maybe certain days, they would get to live and rule the household or indeed the court as lord or lady, even as king or queen. For that brief period of time, the world was allowed to be topsy-turvy. Here then, are we looking at a satire that's designed to function in a similar way? Something that is intended to raise a smile. An image designed to be enjoyed, one that's meant to entertain. Perhaps Massis was inspired to create this figure by reading Erasmus's text In Praise of Folly, which was first published in 1511. The figure of folly in this text, which inspired Hans Holbein the Younger to produce this marginal sketch in 1515, is a woman, dressed in the, quote, odd kind of garb that was more commonly worn by a fool or jester at the time. Certainly, Jones draws a connection between the lady in the portrait and Erasmus's discussion of folly. Jones explains, when discussing the portrait, that Erasmus's folly, quote, sarcastically argues that all relationships need folly and flattery to thrive. In such a way, Erasmus was pillorying those people who, quote, still play the coquette, quote, cannot tear themselves away from their mirrors, and, quote, do not hesitate to exhibit their repulsive, withered breasts. Is the intention, then, for us to view the woman in this portrait as a figure who is worthy of our mockery? A victim of her own vanity, worldly concerns, and, for that matter, folly? On the other hand, it has been suggested that Massis may have been inspired by something else, namely by a series of grotesques that were made by Leonardo da Vinci. After all, one of his pupils made this copy of a now lost work by him. I think the similarities are obvious, and for many years it was assumed that Massis took inspiration from Da Vinci when creating his portrait. More recently, however, this order of events has been challenged, and there has been an ongoing debate as to who inspired whom. And due to the advances we have seen in the technology that we have to analyse and date items, it is now suggested that it was in fact Massis who inspired Da Vinci, who in turn had his work copied by his student. One thing that we can be sure of is that the figure in this portrait, in one version or another, would certainly prove to be inspirational in the 19th century for John Tenniel, when he was setting about creating the illustrations of the Duchess for Lewis Carroll's text, Alice's Adventures in Wonderland from 1865. And with that, we could move on to our conclusion. We could have our discussion of this painting neatly packaged up, wrapped in its little bow, ready to put away, questions answered. I mean, sure, there might be some stragglers, a few itty-bitty loose ends here and there, but broadly speaking, the questions I've asked we have approached and arguably found an answer to. We have, maybe, our conclusion. She is a grotesque, a caricature, a satire on folly, and nothing more than an invented figure of fun. So, why then do I feel no desire to laugh at her? Why do I look at her and feel human connection? In her eyes and their gaze, I see softness, humanity, not folly. And it turns out that I'm not the only one. Michael Baum, Emeritus Professor of Surgery at University College London, has said, quote, I've always been intrigued by this painting. It's fascinating because it is so meticulously and lovingly painted. You think, why would someone go to so much trouble in order to paint such a grotesque image? I always suspected there was something more to it than just a study in grotesquerie. What if this is not an invented character, designed to feature in a satirical painting? What if, instead, this is a portrait of a real person, painted from life? What if what we were actually being shown here is a woman who has taken time to dress herself in her best available clothing, the stuff that still fits her comfortably? What if this is her choosing to sit for posterity in front of an artist who wants to present her faithfully, but also looking her best? According to the National Gallery, in the 17th century, this portrait was, quote, misidentified as Margaret Maltash, Duchess of Carinthia and Countess of Tyrol, a historical figure who had been defamed by her enemies as the, quote, ugliest woman in history. Maltash is a German term that translates literally to mouth bag or mouth pocket, and it's been suggested that this may be an unkind reference to the real Margaret having had some kind of facial difference that potentially would have affected her jaw. However, the real Margaret was born in 1318 and she died in 1369. So if this painting was in fact of her, then it could not have been painted in person because obviously by 1513 or thereabouts, she was long dead. But then in 2008, another suggestion emerged. This one came from Michael Baum, and if that name sounds familiar, he is the Emeritus Professor of Surgery from University College London, the one who I quoted a little while ago in this video. Now, he recounted how he would take his medical students on what he came to refer to as his, quote, National Gallery ward round. On one of these ward rounds, one of his students, called Christopher Cook, suggested and then apparently backed up with, quote, meticulous research, a potential diagnosis for the figure in this portrait. It is a diagnosis that they describe as an advanced form of Paget's disease. In this case, it has apparently a relatively rare presentation, seeing as it appears to affect her whole face and perhaps her entire upper torso. According to the NHS website, quote, Paget's disease of the bone disrupts the normal cycle of bone renewal, causing bones to become weakened and possibly deformed. It's a fairly common condition in the UK, particularly in older people. It's rare in people under 50 years of age. There are treatments, modern treatments, that can help keep it under control for many years, but it can cause persistent pain and a range of other problems in some people. Paget's disease of the bone can sometimes lead to further, potentially serious problems. These include fragile bones that break more easily than normal, enlarged or misshapen bones, permanent hearing loss if the skull is affected, too much calcium in the blood, heart problems, in rare cases, bone cancer. Paget's disease could be responsible for enlarging this woman's jawbones, lengthening her top lip, lifting the tip of her nose. It may have caused the enlarging of her knuckles that is visible here. It may have altered the shape of her forehead, chin, and even her collarbones. But Baum also stated that he was sure that this figure would have been, quote, a very powerful woman, and may even have been a real duchess. I reckon the artist was paid a princely sum to do it, because who is going to buy a painting like that? Artists had to make a living. I think the painting is probably quite a close likeness. There is, though, I think, an alternative suggestion, and that is that she may have come from any walk of society, but simply been someone who caught the artist's attention. Perhaps her differences are something that would make her utterly fascinating to him. And a fascinated artist, I think, recognises that a portrait of someone who has gripped him so completely will potentially find a buyer. After all, we are sufficiently interested by it for us to still be talking about it all these centuries later. People are prepared to pay good money to travel to and pay the entrance fee for an exhibition that features this painting as part of its collection. In fact, I think it probably makes more sense that she wasn't particularly socially powerful, because for me, that might explain the old-fashioned dress she's wearing. Perhaps she is wearing well cared for but old garments of her own, a sign that she does not have a lot of disposable income to hand. Maybe she is even wearing hand-me-downs from a noble benefactor, either a current one or a former one. After all, it was not uncommon or unusual for members of the nobility to gift or bequeath items of clothing to their servants. Or is there perhaps another explanation? Did the clothing come from the artist, from his studio? Were these items that were laying around? Did he dig around in his studio for pieces of clothing that would fit his subject and or complement an image that he was seeking to render? Something that is evident to me is that Massis is engaging with this subject in a markedly different way than the figures we find in another one of his works. Called The Ill-Matched Lovers, this piece dates to around 1520 to 1525. On the right of this image, as we look at it, we are presented with a leering man. His features are distorted and he shows evident signs of age. He clasps at the head and breast of a clearly much younger woman. And behind her, we see a grinning individual, tongue sticking out, dressed in fool's motley. This fool is making use of the man's distraction in order to pick his purse. There are then, arguably, at least two foolish people in this image. And it's the one on the right that is showing us that a fool and his money are soon parted. A deck of cards lays on the table, which may be intended to connect to another foolish way of losing one's money, namely through gambling. Now, when I look at this piece, it is, for me at least, a quite uncomplicated and intentional satire. I feel almost as if I am being presented with a visual tale that has within it a moral, and that these figures are being placed before me to teach me or show me the moral of that story. This image certainly does not conjure anywhere close to the same feeling of connection or indeed empathy that is absolutely being generated in me when I look upon this lady, who gently clasps and perhaps hopefully offers up this closed red rosebud. Is it possible that I feel this way? That I experience this profound sense of difference in my response because the individual in this portrait was a real person, while these three figures in this painting were simply allegorical creations? Before I finish up today, I would like to share with you that if this video has piqued your interest, and I certainly hope it has, then you're going to be in luck. Because The Ugly Duchess, Beauty and Satire in the Renaissance is set to open next Thursday, the 16th of March 2023, in room 46 of the National Gallery in London. In addition to the Duchess, this new exhibition will also display that related drawing which was made by Leonardo da Vinci's student and also her companion piece, An Old Man. This exhibition is not set to run for long. In fact, it's going to close on the 11th of June 2023. But don't worry if you are not going to be able to get to the gallery in person during this period, because you can always check out the online events that are set to run in conjunction with this particular exhibition. Of course, I will be leaving a link to this exhibition and event webpage in my description box if you want to check it out. But what do you think of the portrait we've been exploring today? Do you think that this Duchess was a real woman who was rendered truthfully, maybe even sympathetically? Or was she an invented figure, intended to convey a satirical or perhaps a moralising message? As always, I'm looking forward to reading your conversations in the comment section underneath this video. Or you can come and find me elsewhere on social media. I will be leaving links to all the other places you can find me on the internet in my description box, so please do consider following me over on some or all of those so that we can continue this conversation and start some others. I do hope you enjoyed this video and found it useful, and if you did, why not share it with some friends? In fact, if you like my channel generally, please do let some of your pals know all about it. You can let me know that you like this video by hitting the thumbs up. In fact, all interaction is very much appreciated. Please fill up the comments. If you haven't got anything to say, maybe drop an emoji down there. I'd also love it if you would subscribe to the channel. Now, I say it every week, I'm going to say it again. If you think you're subscribed, have a check. Make sure YouTube hasn't mysteriously unsubscribed you against your will, because for some reason they love to do that. And while you are there, checking, subscribing, potentially resubscribing, I would also really enjoy it if you would hit the bell icon that sits beside the subscribe button, and then you'll get a drop-down menu. Hit all on that drop-down menu when it appears, and that way, allegedly, YouTube will tell you when I've next uploaded and also when I'm set to go live. I hope you're going to have a great day, whatever you're doing, and I look forward to speaking to you all in my next video. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye for now.